guys, how are my alien hunters doing? I hope that you're having a good week and that all of your online classes are going well and that you're managing to get out and about and get exercise and have a good time in some way. So I am here for us to have our aliens class, alien hunting. This week we are going to ask some questions. We are going to think about the questions, what if? What if the Earth were different than it is? What if we found alien life? What if aliens do exist? What would they look like? What if we went back to the moon? So just kind of a lot of different topics. Get ready for a bunch of interesting ideas that are all related to our search for extraterrestrial intelligence, but answer some different questions that we need to think about when we're wondering if aliens are out there. So let's start out with some natural science. Let's start out doing a little bit of what we've been doing throughout this class, where we look at different parts of space. But we're going to ask some questions. The first question we're going to ask is, what if the Earth were as big as the sun? Now, the reason we're asking this is because a lot of what we know, we've talked about this, a lot of what we know about hunting for aliens is because we know what life is like on Earth. But what if the Earth were really different? If the Earth were a lot different than it is, how might life look different? Continuing to talk about that question week after week helps us to open our minds and think more about what could be living out there in the universe. So let's consider, what if the Earth was as big as the sun? Watch this 6-minute video. Just a little disclaimer, I've turned these up as loud as I can. I hope you can hear them really well. If you're having some trouble hearing them, then I also put the links to each video right in the description box. So see, if you're looking at the YouTube video now of this class, if you scroll down, you will see here is the description that I wrote for my video. It's going to look like this, and it's going to say show more. If you click on show more, just like this video has some links and stuff, my video has links to everything that I am playing for you, plus down at the bottom are some bonus links. Links for videos that I did not play in this class recording, but that you might want to check out if you want to learn a little bit more. So if you want to, make sure that you click in that description box and look at some of those videos. Also, at the end of class, I'm going to remind you that last week I gave you a challenge about creating an alien. If you have not yet and you want to, send me your picture, because I'm hoping that for next week's class I'll be able to incorporate some of the pictures you guys have drawn. I'm also going to ask you at the end of this class if you want to draw a picture about an alien or a certain kind of creature to send it to me. So that's coming a little later. For now, let's go back to our question. What if the Earth were as big as the sun? What would be different? Let's watch and find out.
Trees are falling, ecosystems are collapsing, and our infrastructure is crumbling. Crops are failing, and water is scarce. Earth is becoming a dead planet. On the plus side, there's never been a better time to buy property. But who can think about real estate when they can't leave their own home, let alone get out of bed, let alone breathe? This is what if. And here's what would happen if the Earth was as big as the sun. Everyone knows the sun is big. I mean, look at it. And that's just how big it looks from about 150 million kilometers away. Just imagine what it would look like if you were standing next to it. Never mind. The sun accounts for 98% of the mass of our entire solar system. And compared to the densest planet, which is our very own planet Earth, the sun is more than 1 million times more massive. In fact, it would take roughly 1,300,000 planet Earths to fill the entire sun. But what if it only took one? Earth would be a very different place if it were the same size as the sun. Just imagine our whole planet's topography being stretched out. Continents would expand, providing much-needed relief in places where overpopulation inhibits the quality of life. And owning a nice plot of land might actually be more affordable than it is on today's planet Earth. But now we'd also have to consider that every body of water on our planet would have more area to cover. This means that lakes, rivers, and even the oceans would be shallower, making them more susceptible to evaporation and potentially drying out. Marine life would undoubtedly suffer since shallower water would gain more heat from the sun, jeopardizing sea creatures that need colder water to survive. With other, smaller water sources beginning to dry up, wildlife on land might have to relocate or travel much farther for fresh water, which would also put them at risk. Us humans would be in an equally precarious position. Not only would we probably start fighting over the limited fresh water that's available, our food crop yields would also start shrinking. Food crops need a certain amount of soil to grow in and to absorb the nutrients they need. If our world was as big as the sun, then, like the water, our soil would have to be spread out to cover a much larger space. Less soil would mean less food, while the demand for food would stay the same. There's also another issue that we haven't considered, which, when we factor it in, makes life on Earth pretty much impossible. Earth being the same size as the sun is hard enough to imagine, but when you consider a sun-sized Earth having the same mass as the sun, it doesn't only jeopardize our survival, it disrupts our entire solar system. Think about it. With the Earth as big as the sun, you'd pretty much lose the moon either way. But if a planet has more mass, it will also have a stronger gravitational pull. In this case, gravity on Earth would be 28 times as strong as it is now. We'll get to how this affects you in a moment, but first, let's look at the bigger picture. The reason why our solar system moves the way it does now is because the sun's mass is so great. Its gravitational pull forces other planets into its orbit. The sun currently has 98% of the mass in our entire solar system, but now the sun and the Earth would each have 49% of the mass in our solar system. Would this result in some sort of binary system in which the sun and the Earth orbited each other? How would this new rivalry affect the orbits of the other planets in our solar system? And would a significantly higher gravitational pull mean that Earth would get hit by a lot more asteroids? Well, there'd be a lot more to worry about than just asteroids. Our satellites would also probably crash down to Earth, while buildings and bridges would crumble and collapse under the increased gravitational pressure. Only thick trees that were low to the ground would remain standing, but it's unlikely that much else could shoulder the added weight. You would be significantly heavier, and you probably wouldn't be able to walk anywhere. Think about it. If you weigh 50 kilograms on Earth right now, it would feel like you weighed 1,400 kilograms on a sun-sized Earth. The cruel twist is that as gravity increases, time would slow down. So you might be able to live longer, but it would probably be a long life spent lying in bed with aches and pains. Luckily, we can wake up from this nightmare because the Earth will never be as big as the sun. In fact, our planet is actually getting smaller. Our atmosphere leaks, and so we end up losing several hundred tons of mass to space every day. So take a nice deep breath and be glad it's that easy. It's not always a good idea to mess with proportions, and bigger definitely doesn't always mean better. But then, what would life be like if the sun was smaller than the Earth? Well, that's a story for another What If.
So, pretty crazy, huh? How different life would be if the Earth were a whole lot bigger. Now, they were talking about if all of a sudden the Earth spontaneously got bigger. It would probably be different if the Earth had always been as big as the sun. Heck, maybe we wouldn't even be here. Life would not have evolved in the same way. And that's what I really want you guys thinking about a little bit. If the Earth had just, if when the solar system had formed, Earth had formed as large as the sun, would we even be here? Is that part of why astronomers and NASA look at Earth-size planets or planets that are not too different in size from Earth, and they don't look at giant planets when they're looking for life? Something kind of interesting to think about. So the next question that I want to answer is, we of course know that we have a moon, and we know, you should know, that NASA landed people. Neil Armstrong was the first man, followed by Buzz Aldrin, to actually step foot on the moon back in the 1960s. Really big, exciting accomplishment. It happened before I was even born, just a few years before I was born, but it's a pretty darn big deal. But we haven't been back to the moon since. Why not? So this video is 8 minutes long. It's got a lot of people talking in it, so it requires a little bit of thinking. It's not just fancy pictures, and it's not like a really quick video like the last one we just watched. It's a little longer with a little more talking and thinking. So if you want to, now might be a good time to pause the class video and go get yourself a drink or a snack so that you can sit down and be comfortable and try really hard to pay attention to this video, because there's some good information in it, even if it's a little grown up and a little long. Okay, ready? Here we go. Why did NASA stop going to the moon?
NASA stopped going to the moon. In July 1969, Neil Armstrong famously took one small step for man and one giant leap for mankind, becoming an American hero and a cultural icon. Apollo 11 was by all accounts a success, enabling humans to finally visit our closest celestial neighbor. But while the heady highs of 1969 gave us our first steps on the lunar surface, just 3 years later, in 1972, we've made our last. This is Unveiled, and today we're answering the extraordinary question, why did NASA stop going to the moon? Are you a fiend for facts? Are you constantly curious? Then why not subscribe to Unveiled for more clips like this one, and ring the bell for more fascinating content. First, let's rewind. Why did NASA even go to the moon in the first place? Sure, it was an extraordinary achievement, but what exactly made people so desperate to get there in the 60s, since we've seemingly forgotten all about it today? One major motivator was the Cold War. Across the 50s and 60s especially, the Cold War was fought between the US and the USSR via technological one-upmanship in the arms race and the space race. Nuclear weapons were getting more and more powerful, though the lack of any actual conflict thankfully meant that none of them were being used. So both sides decided to use their rockets for something else, spaceflight. And the Soviets took a sizable early lead in the space race. In 1957, they launched the first ever satellite into orbit, Sputnik, and later in the same year, they sent the first animal into orbit, like the dog in Sputnik 2. The Soviet probe Luna 2 became the first ever craft to even reach the moon in 1959. Then in 1961, the USSR sent the first man into space, Yuri Gagarin, and 2 years after that, the first woman, Valentina Tereshkova. By contrast, America didn't send a woman into space until Sally Ride in 1983. And back when the first 2 Sputniks were launched, the US didn't even have a space program at all. NASA wasn't formed until 1958 as a direct result of the Cold War. So after the Soviets quickly accomplished a heap of major milestones for space exploration, it was then down to the USA to do something really impressive. They didn't settle on the moon landing right away, though, briefly proposing an alternative plan called Project A119, which was an alleged US Air Force scheme to detonate a nuclear bomb on the moon. Luckily, when NASA was formed, the powers that be decided to send people to the moon instead of weapons, after wisely guessing that the public probably wouldn't appreciate a nuke in the sky. And so the race was on, and the US were in catch-up mode, as the United States government pumped as much money as possible into the Apollo program. In 1966, NASA received its biggest ever share of the US federal budget, 4.5%. This was $5.9 billion back then, but around $43 billion today. For perspective, NASA's 2019 kitty equals just less than 0.5% of the federal budget at $21 billion. So they're now given less than half the money they once had. In reality, the Apollo space program was ludicrously expensive, and critics of the moon landing labeled it as just one big publicity stunt designed to triumph over the Soviet Union. Of course, it was also an incredible achievement for science and humanity, launching an interest in space travel that remains today. But as soon as Apollo 11 actually won the space race, the government started looking for any excuse to shelve it and save some money. Overall, the Apollo space program that ended with Apollo 17 in 1972 cost around $150 billion in today's money. And while the space race effectively ended in 1969, the Cold War didn't, and the intentions of the government turned elsewhere. But NASA itself, created expressly to put a man on the moon, never totally lost interest in one day returning to our closest neighbor. It only lost the state funding to do so. Nevertheless, with NASA seemingly slowing down their efforts, more and more other space agencies turned their eye to the moon instead. Up until 1990, all prospective lunar missions were dominated by the Americans and the Soviets, but then came the launch of the Titan from ISAS, Japan's former space program. After that, the number of moon missions planned by other countries grew and grew. The current Japanese space program, JAXA, have continued to study the moon, as has the European Space Agency and also ISRO in India. So on an international scale, just because we're no longer sending people moonwards doesn't mean we're not still studying it. Probes and rovers are simply a much more cost-effective and comparatively risk-free option compared to humans. They don't need food, water, or oxygen, and there's zero danger of illness, injury, or death. One of the most significant current lunar leaders is the Chang'e 4 spacecraft sent by the CNSA, China's official space program. The Chang'e 4 is our first craft to land on the fabled dark side of the moon. For some, the move marks the start of a new space race, or new moon race, between China and America. Only this time the US isn't playing catch-up. For others, though, there's no longer a competition at all, and space travel has become a much more collaborative process. Because while the likes of China pushed the boundaries of what was previously possible, NASA hasn't simply been twiddling its thumbs since 1972. In fact, it does have plans to put people back on the moon by the late 2020s, and they did already launch.
Hey, I want to pause right here for a second and just ask you to think about something. They just said that, back in the 1960s, we were in quite a Cold War against Russia. We were really trying to beat them, they were trying to beat us, and that's what sparked us going to the moon. Now, China has decided to go to the moon. We have private companies like SpaceX that are sending rocket ships up and making plans to go to Mars. So do you think, just think in your head, do you feel like space should be a competition? Should it be about what country sends more people up or what country lands where first? Or do you think it's just more important that as a race, that people in general get out to space, that we explore and understand space? Think about that a little bit.
Launch a revitalized moon initiative, the Constellation program, in 2005, although this was subsequently canceled in 2011, again due to cut government spending. What else has happened since the curtain came down on the Apollo missions? Well, the International Space Station for one. A project again more focused on turning space exploration into a united effort, it's jointly operated by 5 different space agencies from around the world. Advocates for the ISS say it holds significantly more promise than another moon landing ever could, given that it serves as an excellent resource to study the effects of actually living and working in outer space. Meanwhile, the moon is still a bleak and desolate.
Hey, remember last week I gave you a link to where you can get email or text alerts telling you when the International Space Station is traveling over Tampa, and you can go right outside and just see it with your naked eye, no telescope required. So if you haven't signed up for that, consider doing it. It's through NASA. It's safe. They're not going to send you any other junk. You're just going to get alerts telling you when the space station's coming, and it's really cool.
Prospect by comparison, meaning once again that NASA's funds are more likely to be spent elsewhere. But of course, it isn't only the ISS that NASA and the government prefers to spend its money on. There's also that other new and exciting prospect that so many have their sights geared towards, Mars. The Mars race is still bubbling away, albeit at a much slower rate than the original space race did, perhaps because there isn't a war to fuel it. And NASA certainly has aims to go to Mars, having already sent various probes and rovers to the Red Planet. Earth's other state-funded agencies also seem bound for Mars, but what makes this race seem different to any other is the power, influence, and potential victory of private companies. Nowadays, NASA also contends with, or works with, the likes of Boeing, Virgin, and SpaceX, and the global focus has decidedly shifted away from the moon, which now, by comparison, doesn't even seem so far away. Today, there are other, even more distant dreams to be had, demanding even greater amounts of time, expertise, and money. Finally, and despite all the indications that NASA has gone cold on the moon for other reasons, there are some more outlandish theories out there. There's the well-peddled conspiracy theory that the moon landings never happened in the first place, and NASA just can't be bothered to fake elaborate lunar missions anymore. There's the idea that humans haven't gone back to the moon for almost 50 years for fear of aliens that supposedly reside there. And there's the notion that the dark side of the moon actually houses a fleet of deadly extraterrestrial spaceships, or that the moon itself is but a hollow spaceship primed to launch. They're all real theories, but...
Ooh, that's a good one. The idea that the moon is nothing but a space station holding a spaceship ready to launch. I would love, if you guys think that's interesting, draw a picture of that. Draw me a spaceship that was embedded inside of the moon and hidden and is launching out into space. Send me a picture of that and I'll put it out in my next class video, because that is a cool idea. I don't believe it for a minute, but it's an awesome idea.
But not exactly real science, and the likeliest truth simply isn't quite so exciting. Sending humans to the moon is an expensive business, and NASA doesn't have the financial firepower it once did. Throw into the mix an increasing demand to send explorers to another planet entirely, and it becomes an even greater task for the agency to balance the books. While renewed plans to send people and probes to explore the lunar surface prove that interest in the moon hasn't gone away, unfortunately, the money has. And that's why NASA stopped going to the moon. What do you...
So there you go. NASA stopped going to the moon basically because they ran out of money. The government just stopped giving them so much funding. Do you think that's okay? Do you wish that we funded NASA more heavily? Or do you think that there are more important things to spend our money on? Think about it. The government has a lot of stuff to spend our money on. In one of in one video that I saw the other day, actually I think I'm going to play that video in just a little while, they say that SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, cost each American 3 cents a year in taxes. And you think, well, 3 cents, that's nothing. We should go ahead and refund, we should be funding SETI. And maybe NASA would cost people only 10 cents a year. But to the government, it comes out to be billions of dollars. Those billions of dollars could be used fighting a war, training soldiers, feeding hungry kids, building better schools, building better health care. I mean, there's a lot of competing things in the world that people want to spend money on, and all of it's important. How important is going to space? So think about that a little bit. Okay, let me glance at my notes here for a second. So here we go. My next question is another what if. We've been talking about what kind of aliens could be out there. And we talked, when we've been talking about aliens, we've been talking a lot about people and how people could have evolved from aliens who came here a long time ago, or how might aliens and life evolved on other planets. But let's consider this. Right here on Earth, people have evolved from cavemen who were not very intelligent, didn't have a lot of abilities, we were a lot shorter, we've gotten taller. People evolved just like animals do. So what would happen if humans as a species kept evolving? Let's watch this video and see how we might change in the future to look alien to our current selves.
What will humans look like in 10,000 years? What about in 1,000,000 years? Will we look like this guy? Probably not, but we'll definitely look different than we do now. What parts of our body would evolve? How long would evolving our bodies take? And who would win the survival of the fittest? This is What If, and here's what would happen if our bodies kept evolving. It took roughly 6 million years for humans to become what we are today, and modern humans have only been around for about 12,000 of those years. Even in that short period of time, humans have evolved slightly. We've become about 10 centimeters taller, and now we can eat dairy foods after childhood. So, if those things can happen in 12,000 years, where might we be hundreds of thousands of years into the future? First, we should probably figure out exactly what evolution is. Evolution is all about changes in the genetic makeup that happen to a species over time. Species with more advantageous traits will tend to have more offspring, so those genetic traits will tend to carry on to later generations. For example, giraffes with longer necks who can reach more food will be able to survive better than giraffes with short necks. And they'll be able to have more babies who will likely have longer necks just like their parents. And as time goes on, the short-necked giraffes will die out, and the long-necked giraffes are the only ones left. That's why all our giraffes today have long necks. So how does this apply to humans exactly? Well, evolution in this sense is actually very hard to predict. In the world we live in, we don't need to worry about survival of the fittest. Technology has effectively canceled a lot of that. You no longer need to worry about being the fastest or the strongest. This isn't 100,000 years ago when you had to fight for your food. Things like houses to live in and clean running water make surviving so much easier. You never think to yourself, how am I going to survive today? But that's something our ancestors had to worry about constantly. It's not guaranteed that 1 million years from now, humans will be stronger, faster, and bigger than ever before. After all, having children today is generally decided by culture and personal choice rather than the need for our species to survive. Our future will be decided by the traits of people who have children and how many children they have. If people who are naturally overweight and have health problems are the only ones having kids over the next million years, then that's how the human race will end up. But we might not need to worry about any of these natural occurrences. Instead, we could become completely fused with technology before any of this happens. Cybernetic arms, brain chips, and laser eyes could all become possibilities. Not only that, but we also might be able to alter a baby's genes before they're born, completely getting rid of evolution altogether. This would allow us to get rid of diseases and any other genetic traits that might harm us. But if we didn't have this luxury, and we had to evolve the old-fashioned way, there's a few things that might happen. We just need to look at how modern humans have evolved in the past 12,000 years. We know we've been getting taller, most likely due to nutrition, and that our brains have been getting smaller. But don't worry, we haven't been getting dumber. Our brains are actually becoming more efficient. So, in 1 million years, we might be incredibly tall humans with tiny heads. Does that remind you of anything? At the end of the day, human evolution is incredibly difficult to predict. That's because evolution is primarily based on our environment. And who knows what might happen to the Earth in the next million years? We might need to evolve to survive fires, as the planet will become so incredibly hot. Ugh, I so hope I'm not around for that. Or, in the next million years, we might live on other planets, like Mars. Humans would evolve to look completely different there, as they'd be living in entirely different conditions than here on Earth. Wondering what living on the red planet would be like? Well, that's a story for another What If.
And maybe we'll watch that one another time. What if we lived on Mars? Because I think that looks like a really, really good one. So, yeah, pretty interesting to think. Think about how you do things so differently from people who lived a long, long time ago. For example, we know that creatures that live in the dark often have really big eyes. Well, we don't live in the dark, but we do stare at computer screens a lot, and our computer screens are lit up, so our eyes don't need to bring in as much light as they used to. Do you think that maybe over like 10,000 years, humans' eyes could get a little bit smaller? That might be a possibility. So, interesting stuff to think of. So, we've talked a little bit about what if humans keep evolving. Oh, I got one more I want to look at is NASA no longer looks for intelligent life. They're just looking at life. Let's watch this. This is a short video, just 1.5 minutes. Let's watch this one and take our topic back out to looking for alien life.
Why haven't we found ET if there really
be out there. Why haven't we found them yet? And given all the effort. Well, to begin with, there hasn't been that much effort because the search for extraterrestrial intelligence in this country is all funded by donations. You know, people will send you a $10 or $20 bill, and it's really hard to conduct a major research program that way because there isn't really adequate funding. It's not government funded. I think the public thinks it is, but it hasn't been for more than 2 decades now.
So SETI is the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. We've talked about that.
When I joined the SETI Institute, it was in the early 1990s, it was still a NASA project. It didn't cost very much. It was 1/1000th of the total NASA budget was costing every American about 3 cents per year. But that was killed in 1993 by a congressman who was looking for some excuse to, save the taxpayers' money. Well, it saved every taxpayer about 3 cents per year. Why have they not put that back into the budget? It's just politics, to be quite honest. It's rather difficult to get something back into a NASA budget when it's been taken out. So yeah, NASA spends hundreds of millions and in some cases billions of dollars to send robotic probes to nearby worlds like Mars and the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, looking for life. I mean, that's what really motivates a lot of this stuff. And yet, an extra fraction of 1% to look for intelligent life has not been politically feasible all this time.
So what he's saying there is, it doesn't cost nearly as much money to look for intelligent life, because you'll remember we talked about this before, that looking for intelligent life can be done from a distance, because we can be looking for their radio signals and things like that. But looking for things like microbes and bugs, well, we have to go there to do that. So which one is worth the money? What makes sense to our society to spend money on, and which one do you care more about? You'd probably be a lot more interested if we found like aliens that could talk and walk and sing songs and chew gum and teach us about interesting new ways to farm vegetables or how to cure cancer than if we just found like some tiny little microbes on some planet and we could possibly find intelligent life from right here on Earth. But yet, is that really possible? What do the greatest minds in the world think? Do they think we should be looking for intelligent life? Well, have you ever heard of Stephen Hawking? He was a very great and famous physicist, and he was a pretty cool guy. He was super smart, and even though he spent most of his adult life paralyzed and unable to talk without the assistance of a computer voice because of a disease that he developed, he still became one of the greatest scientists of all times. Sadly, he died about 2 years ago in 2018, but he was really a great man, and if you know about him, excellent, but if you don't, I want to teach you a little bit about him. Even if you know about him, I think you'll find this video interesting. Here's just a little 2-minute video about Stephen Hawking, and after I play this, we're going to talk a little bit about what Hawking thinks about the search for alien life.
Hello everyone, I'm Alex.
And I'm Sophie, and we are the Science Kids.
Yesterday, one of the greatest scientists of all time, Stephen Hawking, died. So we decided to make a timeline of his life achievements.
This video, of course, was a couple years ago. That's why they said yesterday.
We started in 1962, when he graduated from Oxford University. 1962 is basically when he started his physics career. It's also when he realized that his muscles were not functioning as well as they used to. That led to the sad news in 1963 that he was diagnosed with ALS. ALS, or amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, is a disease when the neurons of the brain that control muscles and movement stop functioning.
Usually, people who are diagnosed are expected to live 2 to 5 years longer.
But that didn't stop him. 3 years later, he completed his doctorate and began his work in the field of relativity and black holes.
Even though most people thought that the end of his life was coming soon, he continued to research and live, which eventually paid off when he discovered that black holes can emit radiation.
Hawking kept doing incredible work in this field, and 4 years later, which by then no one had expected him to live by then, he came up with another groundbreaking discovery, this one even more so than the last one. He discovered that black holes could leak particles and energy into our universe.
In 1988, he published a book called A Brief History of Time. To this day, it is one of the best-selling science books of all time.
Hawking remained alive for a long, long time, much longer than doctors expected. But at the same time, his paralysis was getting worse and worse, to a point where he couldn't even talk. So in 1997, they created a computer for him that converted his text into speech. That's the computer voice we now know as the voice of Stephen Hawking. Hawking earned many awards for his incredible work, including the Copley Medal in 2006 and the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2009. But he didn't stop there. He published more books, earned more awards, and made more discoveries.
Like solving the black hole paradox, a problem that stumped physicists for decades.
And now, in 2018, his work finally comes to an end.
But his discoveries and achievements will live on forever.
So yeah, Stephen Hawking was Hawking, no S on the end, sorry. He was a pretty cool guy, and he was super, super crazy smart. But he wrote a lot of great books to help teach people. In fact, he and his daughter wrote a book for kids and young teenagers about physics and space that's really interesting. So I was super sad when he died. We lost an intelligent and inspiring man. But Stephen was also really open-minded. He was a scientist, but he knew that there were things that science can't yet understand. And he helped fund a group that was searching for aliens. But here's the interesting thing. Hawking didn't really believe they were going to find anything. Stephen Hawking once said, here's a quote I'm going to read you from Hawking, and you can see it on the screen here. "We think that life developed spontaneously on Earth, so it must be possible for life to develop on suitable planets elsewhere in the universe. But we don't know the probability that a planet develops life. If it is very low, we may be the only intelligent life in the galaxy. Another frightening possibility is that intelligent life is not only common, but that it destroys itself when it reaches a stage of advanced technology. Evidence that intelligent life is very short-lived is that we don't seem to have been visited by extraterrestrials." So what he's saying is, assuming that any life had come before us on a different planet, by now they would be way ahead of us in their technology and they would have visited us. The fact that they haven't visited us suggests to him that either there is no intelligent life on any other planet, or that life became intelligent to a certain level, and before it had the ability to travel across the galaxy, it destroyed itself in some way. Interesting theory, right? So now back to his quote. He says, "I'm discounting the claims that UFOs contain aliens. Why would they appear only to cranks and weirdos?" he says. "Do I believe that there is some government conspiracy to conceal the evidence of aliens and keep for themselves the advanced technologies that aliens have? Well, if that were the case," Hawking says, "they aren't making very much use of this alien technology they've discovered." Further evidence, Hawking says, that there is not any intelligent life within a few hundred light years of Earth comes from SETI, the search for extraterrestrial life. SETI hasn't picked up any television quiz shows or anything like that from some alien species. It is true that we advertise our presence by our broadcasts, but given that we haven't been visited for 4 billion years, it isn't likely that aliens are coming to the Earth anytime soon. So Hawking did not really believe, one of the greatest minds ever to live on Earth, believed that aliens probably don't exist. But he believed they could exist. So even though he thought they maybe didn't exist, he was thought enough that he actually helped found a group that searched for them. So I think that's really interesting, because it shows that we just don't know, and that we should be open-minded. That even if you think, oh, there's definitely aliens, you have to be open to the idea that maybe there's not. And if you think, there's no way there's aliens, hey, don't be closed-minded, you never know. Even Stephen Hawking admitted that there could be aliens. So if aliens do exist, we've been talking a lot in this class about what they might look like. I have like 5 videos I want to play you that shows what aliens could look like, but we're starting to run out of time here, so I'm just going to play one to give you a little taste, and then I'll put the other videos into the messages if you want to play more. So here we go. Here's a video on what scientists think aliens could look like.
Scientists across many fields have tackled this question. They can't agree on one shape, size, or color. But some suggest there are key traits no intelligent alien being could live without. For example, living on land in order to develop rocket technology, binocular vision to judge distance, eyes near the brain to minimize the time it takes the brain to receive and process signals, at least 2 legs for mobility, and hands with at least 3 fingers to firmly grip and manipulate tools. When you put all these together, aliens might look a lot like we do.
So did you get what they were saying there? They were saying that in order to build a spaceship that could travel across space, aliens would have to have some basic physical traits. They would have to be able to live on land, because it would be really hard to build a space-going spaceship like underwater or in a swamp. They would have to have some fingers. They would have to have a brain. They would have to have eyes that could sense depth, so at least 2 eyes. And they would have to have, their eyes would have to be kind of close to their brain so that they could think and react quickly to what they see. Interesting, right? Okay, let's keep going.
That's not a surprise, according to the world-leading expert on evolution, Richard Dawkins. Dawkins has said that the building blocks of biology, like protein and DNA, could be the same everywhere. It does look as though protein has got some very, very important properties that might have to be universal. If that's the case, then all life across the cosmos could evolve similarly to Earth's, eventually creating beings that walked and even talked like Homo sapiens. Of course,
Oops, sorry.
there are some who challenge this idea. Astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson has argued that aliens are probably made of the same chemicals as us, helium, carbon, and oxygen. But that doesn't necessarily mean they have to resemble human form. If anything is certain, it is that life elsewhere in the universe, intelligent or otherwise, will look at least as exotic as some of Earth's own life forms. Who is right? That's something only the aliens can answer.
Something only the aliens can answer. So we really don't know for sure, but our scientists tend to think that that aliens would look a lot like humans, at least in some superficial ways. But if you're looking at just those basic ways, a monkey looks a lot like humans. Even a werewolf looks a lot like humans, so they could look different from us and yet kind of the same from us. So I don't know, pretty interesting. So I've got a couple of more videos that speculate on what life on other planets might look like, and I'm going to put those in the email and in the comments for you guys to watch. So, time to wrap up. So last week I asked you to design your own alien that lived on a very specific planet that I described in that message. Now, I'm going to ask you to design another alien. This time you choose the planet. Pick what planet your alien lives on, or what type of planet. You know, is it hot? Is it cold? Is it icy? Does it have water? Is it close to a sun? Far from a sun? Describe your planet, and then design an alien to live there. And then tell us, does your alien have the intelligence to visit Earth? Does it want to visit Earth? Why might it want to visit Earth? So if you can, send me your alien drawing by the end of the week. Because if you want to, you could have your parents just take a picture of it. You could have them record you talking about it and send me like a short video, like less than 30 seconds. Try to use MP4 format so that I can, some people are sending cell phone videos and I'm having trouble downloading those. I'm also going to try to hook up a place where you guys can upload them automatically to YouTube if you want. But if you can send me a picture or a video, I'm going to put all those pictures together in one of these lectures and send it to everybody. If I get enough of them, I'm hoping to see more of your drawings. I've gotten a few. I'd like to see more. So next week I was going to have each of you present your alien if we were in a regular class, but since we're doing classes online, this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to put a video together, so send me whatever you would like to send me, and I will put it in the video lecture that I give out that week. If you want to learn more, I have added some videos to the email I sent your parents and also to the comments in my lecture video. So that's it for today. Remember to be reading. Oh, I thought I had the reading right here. On your bookmark, it tells you what to read for next week. Make sure you're reading your alien book. If you haven't read it yet, this is a great time to catch up. Read it from the beginning. It's an easy read. It's interesting. It's got awesome pictures. So read your book, watch some videos, have a fantastic week, and I will see you again next week. Bye, guys.